All right, well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to the Conservation District's information session on the Conservation Opportunity Fund. This is an annual grant program that we have to help landowners of small tracts of land improve the wildlife habitat on their properties. So we're going to get started with some, let's see, introductions. Sorry, I was having a little bit of problem with my mouse. Gonna get started with some introductions. So wondering if we can just have folks introduce themselves with their name, what town that you're in, what brought you to this webinar, why you're interested in this opportunity, and how you heard about the grant. Is anybody willing to jump in and start?
I'm not sure. You just start talking, or is there a way to identify?
Snow, yeah, why don't you kick us off? If you could just share
Okay.
where you're from.
So I'm Marlow, New Hampshire, and I'm part of the Marlow Conservation Committee. So I'm here for two reasons. My entire life has been wildlife ecology and kind of living off the land. My son is a New Hampshire Fish and Game Conservation Officer. So my property is surrounded by water on three sides, and it has been my heart's desire for 20 years to, really take advantage of the opportunity to draw in, nurture, and even share the wildlife possibilities here on my tract of land.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Snow. Laura, are you willing to share next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Laura. I live in Keene. And I'm interested in this because I've spent the last 4 years really growing biodiversity through plants by planting over 85 trees and thousands of plants on our property. We've also cleared like 80 by 40 feet of bittersweet and multiflora rose and just the worst stuff. So I'm interested in this opportunity to now help fund to fill in these areas. After so many years of maintenance, we're ready to plant.
That is exciting. It's nice to hear that you've already done so much on your property. That's great. I look forward to hearing more about it. And then it looks like we have John.
You do. You have Lori Kaiser. I signed up.
Hi, Lori.
And this is my husband, John Davis, because we're working on these projects together. We live in Hinsdale. We have 2 acres of land with a variety of habitats, and we want to maintain them, and we're trying to create more.
Great, thank you. Jamie, if you're able to unmute and you want to share, that'd be great.
Yep, I am Jamie, and I live in Keene, and a group of neighbors and I are just interested in increasing pollinator habitat around our neighborhood. And so that's why I'm here.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing. The format that we're going to use for this presentation tonight is I'm just going to go through a few slides to get us all on the same page about the grant eligibility and types of projects and about the application. And then we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A and digging into any of project ideas that you might have. So that's sort of the format, but feel free to please put your questions in the chat as we go along. So that way, when I'm done going through the slides, I can take a look at them. And then we can just unmute and also just share questions more informally at the end of the slides. All right, so let's see if I can get this to work here. All right, so the mission of the Conservation Opportunity Fund is, as I said earlier, was to provide landowners of small tracts of land who are interested in improving wildlife habitat on their property, the funding and resources to make that possible. and it's a reimbursement grant. So landowners are asked to be able to put up the funding up front to do the projects once that they're, applied for and a contract is in place. And then the reimbursement does come at the end of the grant period when the final report is submitted with the invoices and all of the reporting needs. Just like to put that up front because sometimes that can be a concern. And we always like to work with people, though, if that is a challenge for waiting for reimbursement, we'll work with people one-on-one to provide some funding in advance as well. So planning, design, and installation is the responsibility of the applicants and the landowners or any contractors that you would hire for consultation or installation. The Conservation District staff, we are able to help with any technical assistance or resources, feedback on your applications, and sort of some hand-holding along the way for successful applicants. But we're really not here to sort of design your projects for you or do the actual installation. It's more about providing the funding and the resources. So who is eligible? Landowners or land stewards in Cheshire County. If you don't own your land and you're a land user in the county, we just want to make sure you have some site security, so you have a long-term lease on that property. So that way, whatever investment is there will have long-term success. You have to have a tract of land that's 25 acres or less to be eligible. And you can be an individual homeowner, a business, an organization, farm or forest landowners, all are eligible for the opportunity. So there's a few different types of projects that we are interested in funding. And if your project idea doesn't fit into these few project ideas that I'm about to share, please let me know in the Q&A, because we would love to hear about new ideas from you guys about what you would like to be able to see for wildlife habitat improvement projects on your property. But here's some of the ones that we're interested in funding. The installation of native pollinator habitat. So planting native vegetation to our region that provides pollen sources and nectar sources, as well as offering like low disturbance areas for nesting and egg laying for pollinators. And there's just some examples, photographs there, what some small sites could look like. Some people also call it like conversion of lawns. So we like to just throw that out there, that is also something. So if you're not going to have like a neat and tidy little pollinator garden, like as we saw in those last pictures with the borders, some people really are just very eager to turn their lawns into more of a meadow look. And that's also something that we're excited to fund, as long as you're utilizing native vegetation. The installation of rain gardens is also something that we're interested in. And if you're not familiar with the rain gardens, their goal is really to divert stormwater from surface water. So collecting stormwater, any runoff from roofs and driveways and impervious surfaces, and allow it to soak into the landscape in a depression in the ground that's planted with native perennial plants and shrubs. And it's really good in helping to improve water quality, if there's their appropriate scale for the property that you're trying to manage. And we also, we work a lot with the New Hampshire DES, Department of Environmental Services, Soak Up the Rain program. And they're happy to provide technical assistance on this if a rain garden is something that you're interested in. So they're wonderful partners. So if you are interested in a rain garden, please do reach out to me. Another eligible project is the creation and maintenance of early successional habitat. So old fields, shrublands, young forests, often referred to as early successional. So not your open meadow situation, not your like forested land, of much of which we see in New Hampshire is more mature forests, but sort of this in-between area. And it's really important for diversity of wildlife, songbirds and others, because it's a habitat in decline in New Hampshire. And then looking at surface water quality along streams, rivers, lakes, planting buffers, vegetated buffers of native trees, shrubs, and perennials to improve water quality and reduce erosion is definitely something we would be excited about funding if you happen to be fortunate enough to have a piece of property that's on water in our region, surface waters in our region. All right. So those are the types of eligible projects. And like I said earlier, if you have other ideas, we can dig into that during the questions at the end of these slides. But what are priorities that we have? This first one seems obvious, but follow application guidelines is a priority. We really appreciate it when people utilize the questions that we have in the narrative and just go along and answer each one instead of kind of creating your own narrative that's not related to the question. So that's very helpful for the reviewers to be able to compare sort of apples to apples on the different proposals. This is another really important piece, is having a plan for site preparation and long-term maintenance. A lot of folks don't think about what it's going to take to bring a plot of land, say if you're doing a pollinator garden, from a lawn to this beautiful garden. It's sort of like, oh, we'll buy the plants, we'll plant the plants. And that's great. That's true. That is a component of it, but there's often a lot of site preparation that has to be considered in the timeline of your plan for your, so trying to make sure you incorporate that into the narrative to show the reviewers that you have a clear understanding of what is needed to be done to have a successful project, as well as the maintenance. Those are just important things to consider. And demonstrating landowner inputs of time and resources is always valuable. Some grants, they call that a match. So it just shows that like you're asking for funding, but you're also really committed to the project and putting your own time and resources into it as well. It's very compelling for the reviewers. And this is a critical one, that whatever you're choosing to do is really informed by the ecology of our region. We're really excited about utilizing native plants, things that are meant to be in our region, because it's best to support the diversity of wildlife that exists here. So considering that as you create your proposal design is really important. And then just providing opportunities for partnership and community education is also of interest. We always love to have peer-to-peer educational opportunities, whether it's opening up your property as a workshop site or like on a garden tour, or if you're willing to write a blog, or various different ways that we can be creative and sort of capture sort of the story of what you're doing so it inspires other landowners in the county. What's not eligible? Things that have already been installed or are in progress. So if, say, you did an awesome pollinator habitat last year, you can't apply for sort of retroactive reimbursement for that project. So we're really just looking to fund new projects for landowners who are seeking to put a plan into action in the coming year. I will clarify, because I'm sure a lot of you like are gardeners, you all have all shared like your passion for doing this work, like plantings and removal of invasives and everything. And we definitely don't want to say that that would be like, if you already have other ongoing projects on your property, that's encouraged. We wouldn't want to say, I just don't want to think that by saying it's like, if you have other, it's just that we want to be able to fund new projects. The funding would have to go towards that. Sorry, stumbling over my words a little. All right, let's see what else. Funding will not be provided for landowner time, research or feasibility studies, or efforts that will not lead to improved habitat. And if you've already received one of these grants, we do ask you to wait 2 years before applying again. So that way we can share the limited resources with more land users and landowners in the community. So awards it's not a large grant program, but it's about $1,500 is the maximum of requests per landowner. And as I had mentioned earlier, they're paid through reimbursement. So at the completion of the project, grantee will put in a request for their reimbursement with a final report. So folks will have to save invoices and receipts along the way, and then they will be reimbursed with the final report. Then we also are always curious about sort of what other inputs went into the project for being successful, because sometimes the projects are much larger than the $1,500 can fund. And so we're always interested to better understand sort of how projects, what it takes in full to make a project successful. So the timeline, right now we're accepting proposals, and we're doing happy to have one-on-one conversations with anybody who's interested in putting in an application. They are due on February 1st. So they have just under 2 months before that they're due. During the month of February, we'll have a selection committee that reviews them. And then in March, you'd be notified if you're successful. And then you'd have the full season to implement your project. And we ask for people to submit their final reports in December of the same year. So when considering what types of projects would be best for this, because they're small projects, $1,500, we do look for people to think about their timeline being within the given year of the application. So what to include in the project narrative? We asked you to include about your project goals, in a summary of your project, and a detailed budget as well. And the budget is, it's best when you can show the review panel that you have done your homework. You've looked around at the prices for plants, for any soil amendments, for mulch, anything that you're utilizing to create the wildlife habitat. So that way you can have a really well-informed budget, which will ensure your project being successful. Sometimes it requires site work or hiring contractors. So if you do plan to utilize a contractor, reaching out to somebody, getting a quote to inform the budget is also very helpful. A map is something we request, and this can be intimidating for some people. We are not expecting you guys to be cartographers, like in any way. Like, we want it to be as simple. It can be as simple as a hand-drawn map of your property. If you'd rather take a photograph of your property and like draw digitally on it and submit that, that's also fine. And we'd be happy to show you some examples of other maps, but it can really be very simple. All we're trying to do is get a picture of your land, because you guys have a very clear sense of what your property looks like and how your plans are going to be put into place. But the reviewers on the selection committee really utilize these maps and photographs that we ask you to submit so they can better understand sort of what it looks like and how it fits into your project plans. All right, so just a few more tips is we do have some suggested resources on this web link, which is our regular website with the /COF, which stands for Conservation Opportunity Fund. There's some great resources on there about pollinator habitat creation, rain garden creation, early successional habitat, and others. As we talked about earlier, researching your budget, providing a plan, putting that into your putting the research and notes right into your application. And then if you have questions, reach out to us. I think this is something that we really enjoy, is talking to people one-on-one, and we'd love to hear about any project ideas you have and offer feedback, answer any questions that you might have in advance of February 1st. We do ask if it's possible, please don't wait until the morning of February 1st, because that's when a lot of people, right to the end. So please, we would love to be able to provide you feedback in advance. So a little more detail, this gets into what the narrative is going to be asking you. Ask you to briefly describe your project. That's sort of your summary. What are the expected outcomes of your project? So what do you want to see as the results? That's what we're asking there. And then activities and tasks. Please provide us with nice detailed activity lists to show the reviewers that you understand the steps that it takes to do the application. The fourth question on there is about what can we do to help you for technical assistance for your project to be successful. That's something that oftentimes, like if there's a weak point in your project, like say you're a little uncertain of certain, which species to use of native plants in this certain area because of these certain site conditions, and you haven't been able to find it through your research, that's fine. We don't expect you to be an expert. Like, put that in here. This is sort of the question of, what do you want help with? What do you know are sort of the weak points and the ways that we could step in and sort of be of assistance for your project? Our fifth question is sort of the opportunity for you to share sort of what strengths that you bring to the project to make it successful. Sounds like a lot of you have a lot of great experience working on your properties, so being able to share that here helps build confidence in the reviewers that you will be able to successfully complete your project. And then the sixth question is about long-term maintenance. And that's, depending on your project, that's going to be a little different for whatever that is. So just sort of thinking through, you know, after year one, what's going to be needed and are you willing to do it? And then the seventh question is about that education. So workshops, newsletters, offering blog posts, maybe providing us some pictures and content for social media posts can really look different depending on your own personal interests and what you'd like to do. All right. Now that's all of our prepared slides. So I'm going to stop the share so I can be able to check out the chat and talk to you guys to see if there's anything in there. And I would encourage you, if you have any questions or want to talk through your project, we can just be informal. It's a small group and open it up. Oh, Snow, I see that you're talking, but you're on mute.
Better?
Yes.
Obviously my property I'm interested in, but Marlow Conservation Committee, part of what we want to do is to form an education outreach community, pollinator garden, something. So right now we're pursuing, like you said, a piece of land that could be kind of centrally located. Would we be eligible too if we could put a proposal together? We really want to tie in the school, the church, you know, all the different outreaches for this project in Marlow. We'd really like to do something.
Absolutely. Actually, I mean, that's a real strength that the reviewers would see in a project, is when you have different community group involvement. We funded projects on city land in Keene, for example, like a rain garden in the Ushuaia River Park that incorporated work with some of the master gardeners, or different church groups that have done it and work with schools. So absolutely, that would be seen as a positive, not a deterrent for funding.
Would we need like a Zoom meeting or something with you at our next conservation meeting? What do we need to do to formalize this?
So you don't need to have us at any of your meetings or have a specific meeting with us necessarily. It's really just the application that has to be completed and put in by February 1st at the latest. Though, if you have questions and it would be helpful, please do send us the information, and I can pass, and we can look at our schedules and see if it would work with our schedules to be able to attend your conservation commission, and we certainly would be willing to do that.
Yeah, we really want to just change the whole face of conservation in Marlow. We really want to just a big breakthrough. That's
awesome. I'm glad you guys are so enthusiastic. Yeah, just keep in touch and let us know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions or any thoughts on what you would like to share? Any thoughts on what project that you plan to do, and if have any sort of concerns or questions about whether it be a fit or how to make a competitive proposal?
Okay, I do have a question.
Great.
I might have several.
Wonderful.
Right now we have a huge lawn conversion in progress, which, as I'm understanding it, is not eligible. We're turning it into a meadow. And we have other projects in progress, but I still would like some advice from the Conservation District on what's going to happen.
Well, let me just say that before, you just I don't want you to make an assumption that it's not eligible in any way because you've already done some work on your property. I think why we said like things that have already been done or works in progress, we try to deter people from, is that we just don't want to be doing like retroactively something. So like if you have a component of your project that you haven't gotten started yet, we would be happy to like accept an application for that. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times
Right.
people do it in phases. So say you've already done like a couple phases or certain areas of your property, but you haven't gotten started on other ones, certainly would be happy to talk to you about funding for those. So I don't know if that changes things for you.
No,
but
because we have several projects we could be doing here. It's a very interesting piece of property, even though it's Hinsdale. We live on River Road. It runs along the Ashwellet River.
Right.
So the river is across the street.
Right.
And then we have a pretty big expanse of lawn that I think at one time was probably just farmed. And we don't want the lawn, not totally. So part of it is our garden up near the house, but down below, how many square feet?
We did 3,500. Well, how much square foot we converted?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3,500 we converted to meadow.
We killed the lawn. And
Wow.
now we're going to be, looking for the plants to be coming up in the spring. We didn't want to wait for the next cycle of this.
Mm-hmm.
But we planted evergreens and native plants, and then in the corner of the property there's a wetlands area, and we're not sure how to handle that right now. We just remove invasives and leave the plants that are in there, the other ones there, the dogwood and Joe Pye weed and that sort of thing. And then behind the house we have woods. So there's a place there that the previous owner had turned into a mulched garden bed with non-native perennials. And we took that out because we want it to kind of flow naturally into the woodland area. So that might be the one we want to look at. But I still feel as if we need some help with the meadow.
Sure. Well, those all sound like they would be good fits for this. If the meadow, for example, if you have, sounds like you've killed the lawn, is that correct? But you haven't started the planting for that meadow yet, the seeding.
No, we seeded it.
Oh, you did seed it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good that you did it in the fall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Okay,
did.
good.
We followed the UNH extension plan to the letter.
Oh, perfect. That's good. Sounds like you guys are off to the right start. Fall is really the best time to do it. So that's wonderful.
But what's going to happen, we don't know. And how to handle it from there on out, we're not.
Well, one thing that we always welcome for folks too, is like what we do with all the applicants is to offer site visits. For anybody who's a successful applicant, we request to go to the site in advance of the start of your project. So we could come to your site and sort of do a walkthrough and talk to you and like hear any questions, be able to see it, which is really helpful usually to see sort of the progress and look at the site conditions, and be able to offer any advice that we would have on sort of next steps or feedback on what's needed for a project. So I would encourage you, if you're going to put in an application, even if it's for a different component of the project, that because sounds like you guys have already done the meadow establishment, like we could still come and do a site visit and talk about the different areas on your property that you have questions and concerns.
I have a question. If you're done, I don't okay, all right. Sounds like you have a really big project. So I guess within the detailed kind of like itemized budget of the grant, like how is there like a little bit of a grace, like wiggle room on that? Because I feel like with contractors, especially, like I'll have them come in and get a quote. And then when they're actually working on the project, they're like, oh, well, we're going to change this price here and there. So like how hard and fast are these? Like, do we have to be with how we write the grant? Like, is it like 100% accurate? Like, what's the wiggle room?
It's definitely a budget. So we understand that. And we don't hold people to it to be perfect. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times when I talk to the grantees about sort of once their projects are funded, and then we know things are going to evolve. Like you might have an awesome planting plan, and we're going to get 6 Joe Pye weeds and 5 cardinal flowers and 3 of these. And then you're like, oh, the availability is different at the nursery and the prices changed from when you looked at it. We understand that that is reality. And so really what we're seeking in the budget is just to see that you've thought through based on the scale of your project and the actual costs of some of the plants and sort of what would be needed. So the budget is really there for sort of like a planning tool for you as the landowner. And to show the reviewers that it's thoughtful and it's gonna work for you. But we always tell folks, like, once the project is funded and you are starting to buy in materials and we know things are going to change, like as long as you stick to the intent of the project is what that you put in there. Like you're still using natives, you're still using sort of like the site characteristics, like whether it's wet or it's dry or if it's sunny or shady, like using all those things that you thought of to create the budget and plan as your guide, and you're not changing the goals of your project, then we're really flexible and happy to work with people about any changes to the budget and shift things around. So I think it's all about good communication too. So usually once we get the awards out and a contract for the grantees, like we'll do the site visit, we'll talk to you about it, and then sort of work with you throughout the process if you have questions and if you want to make any changes. If they're major changes beyond 25% of your budget, like then we would ask you to sort of reach out and talk to us about sort of what that looks like to get an approval to make sure we're all on the same page. But for the most part, we understand sometimes these things are a little fluid.
Yeah. So I kind of have an oddball question. So I have so many projects that I've realized over the years, like the last 4 years, in the garden. And so is it possible to like have, for example, like this one section, it's like 60 feet by 20 feet that I've removed honeysuckle, the invasive honeysuckle, and last year did planting. And so for example, could I write in the grant, as a smaller segment of the project, like filling in a couple of plants there, as well as the rain garden I want to do? Because I feel like I'm envisioning utilizing this grant really just to hire the contractors with big, heavy equipment early in the year so that I could do the manual labor to like fill in and ask neighbors for divisions of plants, more or less. So how would I structure writing the grant just so that I can really have the foundational elements like intact so that I can focus on developing and essentially the manual labor to finish the project?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing your question correctly. So basically wondering like if you can incorporate different components. So like the rain garden and sort of like adding more native plants into an area you've cleared of invasives.
Yeah.
That is fine to do, to have multiple different components. If you think that the budget kind of allows it, it's okay to incorporate different components of your yard. But I've heard the selection committee work with a couple landowners before to be like, don't bite off more than you can chew at one point, like for the project, because of just the commitment level of like it being one season. And so I would just warn you not to put in too many scattered different project goals in there, because sometimes it makes it well, one, more confusing for the reviewers to better understand the full picture of sort of what are the goals of the project. And then two, like they will question, like, is this too much that they're trying to accomplish, or is it manageable in the given season, and the funding that's there. But I think if you put it in the context of the big picture of your property and like the work that you've been doing, and that, like, you know, you can sort of break it down into very achievable goals for this coming year, then I think it's absolutely fine to be able to include like 2 to 3 different projects within it.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm kind of one of those people where I have a hobby and I just get so obsessive. And the first year of the pandemic, I put 7 garden beds, and it was my life and it was wonderful. So I feel ready to get back to that level, but I understand the limitations of time, and obviously don't want to make this too confusing for grant application.
And we don't want to hold you back either. Like, I mean, everybody knows like their own, what their capacity is. Everybody's got a different level of capacity. So as long as you can sort of write it up in a very clear way of like goal 1, goal 2, and like how they complement each other, how they're working together for your overall goals of your property, I think that totally works.
Okay. And then my last question is, do you know of any like resources that offers like native plants a little bit cheaper? 'Cause I've ordered in the past through the Hillsborough County Conservation District. You know, sometimes they don't have the largest selection with their sources. Do you have any other recommendations?
There's a few. The state nursery, have you ordered from the state nursery at all?
No.
So New Hampshire is one of the states that has an awesome state nursery, actually. They don't have a really wide selection, and the plants are young. Just so you know, there's often saplings and they're small size, but they're awesome natives and they do a really good job with them. So they're very affordable, like extremely affordable compared to going to nurseries. We usually recommend for people to purchase from there, pot them up, because a lot of times they're like bare root stock. Just like if you'd order, I don't know if you've ever ordered from Fedco of Maine. Their stuff comes delivered as bare root stock as well. Bare root stock is wonderful. It's typically more affordable than buying potted plants in nurseries. But sometimes it helps to pot them up when you first get them, with some good soil and compost and everything, and keep them sort of in that nurtured environment, and then plant them in the fall, like later in the season. Like, they will be so much more successful if you kind of create a little like potted plant nursery, where you can keep them all together in like an environment that's like slightly shady and good source to water. So I would recommend the state nursery and Fedco in Maine for those bare root plants. Fedco is a lot more expensive than the state nursery, but still can be another good source. Bagley Pond Perennials is a private business that has been a really great partner vendor for many of our grantees in past years. And they have a pretty good variety of native shrubs, trees, perennials. And then Nasami Farm is another wonderful source. They're based out of Massachusetts. The Native Plant Trust, I think they're called now. They changed their name a little while ago.
What was the name of it again?
Nasami Farm, Nasami. And they're based out of Massachusetts, and they are really a fantastic resource as well. More locally, newer native plant nursery started in Jaffrey, Facet Farm Nursery, right at the base of Mount Monadnock. That might be of interest to you as well. And happy to, so the list, so there are quite a few sources of different native plants varieties around. A lot of it you have to plan in advance with some like the Fedco, like the ordering, and like, you know, like working with Hillsborough County Conservation District, like plant or order in advance. Same thing with Fedco, same thing with the state nursery. So sometimes the timing doesn't work out for this grant, which we are aware of and is unfortunate because sometimes you have to order them in advance of knowing if you got the grant or not. So it is a risk there if you were depending on the grant funding for covering the cost of the plants. But we understand, and we don't hold that against people. And so if you are successful with your application, like we will still reimburse you for those plants if it's part of a plan and they are all natives and suited to the area.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else have other questions or anything you'd like to cover? Well, I will just then close up by inviting you to please reach out one-on-one if you have any questions as you prepare the narrative and the budget for your project. Both myself and my colleague Matt Smetana at the Conservation District are really always eager to talk to people and help out. And check out the website for those resources, see about some of the plant lists and different guidance documents that are on there. And we hope that you submit an application and we have the opportunity to work with you further. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you.